we teach AGI to think, reason, and code so you don't have to. And I was like, is that what we want? Do we not want to think anymore?
Adam Gazzaley is, as I said earlier, one of the most cutting-edge neuroscientists, and he's been working on brain plasticity. He's written a book called The Ancient Brain in a High-Tech World, which really sums up some of the kind of contrapuntal forces that we are undergoing in our time. And he looks at ideas of the distracted mind and many others, which we're going to talk to him about. But the idea of brain plasticity, that how is our ancient brain developed over 70, 80, 90,000 years and more, how is it responding to this accelerated time, and how will it transit into the kind of technological future that we've been listening to and which Nick summed up and distilled so vividly for us right now. So ladies and gentlemen, for a further look and dimension, understanding of ourselves, please welcome on stage Adam Gazzaley. Thank you so much for being here, Adam.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited. I've been enjoying it. I've been in this audience the entire time, so thanks for having me.
Thank you. So Adam, you know, as I was sharing with the audience, that you have many exciting concepts, but at the heart of it is this ancient brain in the high-tech world. And we all know that we are suffering escalated amounts of stress and anxiety and, you know, mental health conditions, etc. So help us understand the physiology of this, what's going on, and how is our ancient chimpanzee brain dealing with this accelerated technology?
Yeah, thank you. You know, I've been sitting here, like everyone else, listening to some amazing visions of the future and the time that we're at right now with AI. And frankly, I find a lot of it a little bit disturbing, to be quite honest. I love technology. I have all of the tech, but I do feel a little worried about the stage that we're entering. And largely because if you take a sort of evolutionary perspective on our brains and what type of environment it was created to thrive in, it's so vastly different from the one we're in right now. And that has created an immense amount of challenge for us to process the world around us, because we have all these ancient aspects of how we interact in the world that are still there. And, you know, for example, how we interact with information, how we direct our attention to things that are relevant to us or things that are pulling us from the environment. And I would say that we're at a crisis point in many ways right now, even before superintelligent AI arrives, in terms of our cognition and how we manage our lives, both from the clinical perspective, I'm a neurologist, but even just from the human perspective of how we are doing in this world right now before we even enter this next phase. It's concerning to me.
Right. You know, so one very sort of empirical proof of this crisis that you're describing is our attention spans, and all of us know that, you know. So it's come down to, if I'm correct, 8 seconds, you know, less than an ostrich, less than a chimpanzee. That's just shocking. And that's happening in a very short frame of time. So Adam, again, like I said, before we come to some of your you know, outlier ideas, what is being done to us, you know, through technology, like this bottom-up, top-down loop, and that's a very, again, mapped impact of technology. It's a very conscious thing that technology makers are doing to us. So help the audience understand that.
Sure. So attention is something that I feel probably all of you believe you understand, and you do in many ways, but it's such a complex topic, and we have many different windows into attention. One way of thinking about it is through this vision of bottom up and top down. Bottom up is the more ancient attention. It's the attention that the environment imposes upon you. So something that's very novel, very salient, your name or a flash of light, a loud sound, demands your attention independent of your goals. And that's how we survived in the world. That's how animals are largely interacting with the world through bottom-up attention. But perhaps what makes us most human is top-down attention, our ability to direct our limited resources where in space and time we want them to be based upon our goals. And it's incredibly powerful. I would say that unarguably it's what allowed us to create society and technology and music and art, but it's limited. And technology has really challenged that by offering us, and intentionally in many ways, all these powerful forces that are constantly pulling our attention away from our goals. And this degrades our ability to focus in a sustained way when we're interacting with loved ones and our work, and leads to increases in anxiety and stress and impairs our sleep. The other thing that's worth noting is that attention is the foundation of all higher cognition. And so if it is fragmented, if we have the inability to sustain our attention, then you see a detriment, sort of a cascading effects on how we perceive, how we remember, and how we imagine, how we regulate our emotions, feel empathy, compassion. And I would say if you look across the whole view, we're sort of tragically lacking in our ability to do that. I've never said this before, but as I'm listening to all these amazing visions of the future of AI, I feel this sense of like irony in that, think about all the time and billions of dollars that we're investing in advancing AI when human intelligence is in shambles. It's sort of just mind-blowing to me. I just keep thinking about that. Like, imagine we just took a percentage of that and said, how about if we elevate what makes us human as opposed to create another species? What would we do if we could sustain our attention in a deeper way? If we could interact with nature in a more evolved manner? If we could feel deeper and have greater empathy and compassion, going back to Matthew's point, can't we think about technology as unlocking that potential as opposed to offloading us? One last thing I want to say on this. Just last month, I live in San Francisco. I was leaving the airport, SFO, and I started thinking about this. I was giving a talk in Chile, and I was thinking about AI and how this aspect of it is bothersome to me. And I passed this big sign, and I just looked it up to remember and get it exactly right. It said, "We teach AGI to think, reason, and code so you don't have to." And I was like, is that what we want? Do we not want to think anymore? Do we not want to reason? Are those things that we're like happy to give up? Like, I'm glad I don't have to do long division. I'm glad calculators exist, but I like thinking. I have these 2 little daughters now, and I'm like, are they just going to like be hooked up to an IV and laying there and let everyone else do the thinking? These other species that we create. So I really feel concerned that we're not being intentional about what we build. And we're in this race to build it, and some of it I think we're just building because we can, and like the people that are building it are super smart and nerdy, and they would be like, look what I created. But why are we building it? Do we want that? Do we really want to offload some of these aspects that are most important to us as humans? And that's something that I think we need to really slow down and think about very carefully.
Adam, clearly you touched a chord, and that's something that we're all feeling while listening to this. But I think it would be, again, beholden on me as a kind of curator and the moderator of this to bring back some of the complexity of that. And I think Pushmeet represented that yesterday, because the reason this is so hard to turn the tap off on is because that technology does come with the power to predict proteins at the exponential level that say AlphaFold is doing. That's part of the technology, and one is not really able to silo off the two things, or say fill the labor gap on doctors and teachers, or in societies that no longer have enough labor. Of course, I think they could let in some migration, but that's a different matter. But they prefer robots, but yes, there's a labor gap. So, everybody has a way of kind of finessing it by presenting what good can come out of it. So that makes it complex. But similarly, to play to your point about intentionality, I was asking Nick that, and Pushmeet said that don't make it into a cartoonish scenario. They're very thoughtful, idealistic people there. But last year there was Tobias Rose Stockwell, who's written a book called The Outrage Machine, and he mapped, and this is something that the audience, I think, will immediately recognize, so it's not in the future, that social media has completely scrambled our brains. We know that our children are having a mental health crisis. We know we are all addicted. And we know that those companies know that they are triggering our dopamine loops, and they're building empires of attention on our dopamine loops. It's a very conscious commercial transaction going on, and you're the scientist that knows what happens when our dopamine loops are played on like that. So share that with the audience, because I think it'll bring home this point about intentionality that you're making.
Well, it's the perfect point. Like, we just went through this, right? We had this sort of loose idea that if we were more connected, it would be better. So let's build these large social networks. But it was not really thought out carefully enough. I think we're all aware of that now. Nor were the monitors in place to say, let's say this is harmful. Let's say 14-year-old girl doesn't really need to know what every one of her friends are doing right now when she's not doing it. What happens? So I feel like we just got a really good example about how technology that really controls information flow to us can be quite dangerous. And so we should take this lesson to heart and be like, okay, as we move forward, we need to think carefully. Now, what does it do to us? Because of we are information-seeking creatures. And going back to the ancient brain, I have this thesis that we forage for information in very similar ways to which other animals forage for food. And so we are interacting with the environment, trying to gain these information sort of bundles. But when it is just so accessible to us, all over the place, in our pockets, streaming in all the time, we're constantly being derailed through these ancient mechanisms that just cause us to seek out novelty. And so we just don't engage in content long enough to think deeply about it and to really have it sort of increase our ability to invoke positive change. So this is the type of fragmentation that we're already seeing with the technologies that we have right now. And there is a very real danger that this is going to get a lot worse moving forward.
But, just to go back to that bottom up before we move to your own tightrope of good and evil, Adam, is this thing about the bottom up. I'd just like you to share that a little more, that when we get these little notifications and, the sounds, that it's something outside of your control, it's triggering something which was designed for the savannas when the panthers were, chasing us. The same thing kicks in. So share that with the audience, please.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the bottom-up attention is the more ancient attention. It's the survival attention, and we still have it. It's still there, and it's good that it's still there. If you're walking across the street thinking about something lost on your phone and someone beeps, you want to pay attention. That's a good example of a bottom-up stimulus. But when we go about our complex lives with our top-down attention, what you're doing right now, you're choosing to pay attention, direct your visual and auditory resources at me and what we're saying now. We are still very susceptible to bottom-up influences, and technology companies have been very clever in offering us a host of ways to direct our attention away from our goals to where they want our attention. So all the flashes, pings, vibrations, multiple screens, tabs open all the time, all of this, without our control, pulls our attention away from our goals and fragments it. And then it creates a sort of cognitive habit or pattern that this is how we interact with the world. And it starts becoming very satisfying. And then what happens is it gets very hard for us to control and hold our attention in a long, sustained manner. And some people are just not able to do that anymore. And so when we lose that ability, we really pay a great price.
So just coming to the thing of brain plasticity, again, this is a crisis that anybody dealing both as young people, as children, or as colleagues, there's this sense, and of course every generation thinks they were better than the next one, but there is an idea that the reward loops are becoming smaller and smaller. So there is less resilience, and if there's much more mental health crisis, and because also there's less staying power, because people are seeking their dopamine loops even in life much faster.
Exactly.
So talk about the brain plasticity, Adam. Could it in such a short time that really the physiology of the brain could have changed in a younger generation?
100%. I mean, that's what our brain does. Our brain changes. It's constantly, like, what you're picturing as a brain right now it's not really what it is. It's constantly moving, changing dynamically in response to the environment. It's happening right now. And so if you look at every level, structure, chemistry, function, the brain is constantly and dynamically responding to our environment. So it doesn't take long for the brain to change. I mean, the good thing is that it could change other ways as well. And, I don't think I've been convinced that any of the behaviors and cognitive patterns that we're talking about are permanent. But certainly, if you grow up with that's your only exposure, it's going to set the sort of framework and scaffolding for how your brain will be potentially for the rest of your life. So it will have a greater impact, in our children that are growing up with this type of style of interacting with the environment. But the brain's a plastic, and that's the opportunity, is that if we set our intentions to it and decide that we want to have better brains, we want to elevate the human mind, that is possible.
So that brings me to your next milestone, Adam is literally the first FDA-approved, creator of the first FDA-approved digital game, for ADHD patients as well as elderly people suffering from memory deterioration and etc. So there again is this dilemma of technology, because you are using digital games and these tools of attention economy to actually improve the brain plasticity. So talk to the audience about your endeavor.
Sure. This is why I'm glad we have some time to unpack this, because, on one side I wrote a book called The Distracted Mind, and on the other side I build video games for kids. So like that, how does that work? And, the basic premise is that technology doesn't really have a morality or a direction. And we've been talking about how broad technology is. And as we know, fire, it could burn your house down, it could cook your food, right? A molecule could be medicine or poison, depending on the dose. And nuclear power could be energy or a bomb, and same thing with technology. It's not good or bad, it's how we use it. And so I was really inspired by this idea and thinking that, wow, technology, information technology, the tools that deliver it, the software, the hardware, is ubiquitous in the world. And where we have trouble getting a doctor or a teacher, people have phones with Wi-Fi. Can we leverage all of this advancement in technology to serve tools to deliver experiences? So I used to call it digital medicine. I actually call it experiential medicine now, because the digital is the pill. The medicine is the experience. Our brains, through experience-dependent plasticity, change. This is the entire basis of learning. It doesn't end after critical stages of development. It's with us for the rest of our lives. So if we can design technology to deliver high-level targeted experiences that are adaptive to you so that they're personalized, they're not so hard where they become frustrating and you give up, or so easy that they're boring. They're reading out data from you all the time, adjusting the challenges, the rewards, and the stimulation to push your brain to optimize its function by essentially just harnessing the inherent plasticity of your brain. Can we improve function? This was sort of the challenge that I presented to myself 18 years ago. And I decided if we're going to build a digital technology to deliver this type of experience, a video game is a great format for it. Because games are a unique type of experience, right? They're fun, they're engaging, people are deeply immersed in it in the moment, and then they return to it. And so 18 years ago, I came up with an idea to build a video game built on my research on attention that would challenge attention at a very high level, with the hypothesis that because different aspects of attention, what we call cognitive control, have overlapping neural networks, we would see a transfer of benefits from getting better at the game to other aspects of attention. And that's what we showed. First in a paper in older adults published in Nature in 2013, showing that they got better at the game, but also their short-term memory for faces and their ability to sustain their attention in boring environments got better. And then if we fast forward a decade, we then, I started a company to move this outside of my laboratory. My day job is a professor in a university, but I know that if you're going to build anything more than a prototype, you need a company to do that. And then we did multiple research trials and then presented to the FDA for the first time a video game to improve attention in children with ADHD, and did a phase 3 trial, a deep dive, randomized, multi-site, prospectively designed, placebo-controlled trial on kids with ADHD, and showed that we improved their attention and their behaviors. And after like a pretty grueling 2 years trying to convince the FDA that, you know, we pre-submitted this with our outcome measures, as you do when you get a device approved, that this is a treatment. In 2020, after 15 years, this was approved as the first and still only video game as a medical treatment. So I'm super proud of the hundreds of people that worked on this. And now it's approved, 3 approvals now for children, for adolescents, and adults with ADHD. And then just this week, the PMDA, which is in Japan, the Japanese version of the FDA, based on 2 research trials in children in Japan with ADHD, just approved it there as a treatment for ADHD, which to me is vastly exciting, even more so than just the FDA approval, because it says that this is not a cultural phenomenon. It's a human thing that we can improve attention through experience. So I hope that maybe even in India, that we continue to advance this idea of using technology to deliver experiences to improve the function of the brain.
Rather than the other way around.
Rather than the other way around.
How do you use the human mind to improve the technological mind, you know? But anyway, Adam, so coming back, as I said, to your own sort of, you know, Faustian choice, which is that you've taken the logic of this even further, and you were sharing with me that your real excitement now, and you were doing experiments with that, you've created the glass brain, that you're using AR, VR, realities. Yeah. To go even further into therapeutics. And your idea is that you could have an AI biosensing mechanism which would be sensing every molecule, every change in your brain state, and that you would then design targeted experiences to improve people's state of mind. Right. So before I ask you the hard question, share the good part of it. You know, okay. What is this idea of the AI womb that you're trying to create?
I'll try to break this down quickly without slides. You know, again, AI is not a good or bad thing. It's a human-created tool that we get to decide how it works and who, you know, this is at least our chance to decide. So I think there's no better use of AI than to improve HI, right? Human intelligence. So how can we do that? So how our video games work right now, we call them closed-loop video games. So they're very simple. They read out performance metrics, like how fast or accurate you are, and then use what we call adaptive staircase algorithms to then go up or down on the challenges and rewards, and then deliver it back to you through gameplay. This is how our FDA video game works. If you jump into the future, let's say 5 years in the future, and think about how AI can play a role in this. So the first thing is that instead of just feeding in these performance metrics, you could record multimodal physiological metrics of the body. We're doing this right now, 160 electrodes, to try to understand the state of an individual, their level of arousal, the valence of it, their attention, their awareness. You could feed this data into a much more sophisticated algorithm that uses AI, like Gen AI, to feed back not just a video game on a tablet or a phone, but a full multi-sensory immersive environment, one that's adjusting to you, to your states, to help challenge and reward you, to help your brain flourish. That is the idea. That is my vision of how we can use AI in this positive way, where the intentions of it are to advance how we think and feel, and things including empathy and compassion, that this is a future of both multi-physiological recordings, AI, and multi-sensory immersion.
Right. So if I can say it in English to the audience, it's also a way of, and this is, as we've been listening, everything is moving to hyper-personalized medicine and bioinformatics. So it's really mapping all your states of being at all times. And then that the AI, the large language models that we are using now in our public lives would actually be feeding on just your personal data. It would keep improving, get to know you better. To use Adam's phrase, it would end up knowing you better than your parents or you yourself. And it would, know predictive that if you're going to have a depression flare or if you're going to fall physiologically ill, it would be a kind of prophylactic and stop you in time, And your idea there is this womb that Adam is saying, and describe that before, that it's something you could step into. It's like your little dose of health before you step out into a larger world. And you were imagining that with your own daughter. So do share that with the audience.
Yeah, you could probably find this online. You know, I tried to create a future scenario that did not seem dystopian. I understand the challenges of what I just described, but, you know, we know AI is coming, right? So I'm not saying we could put this genie back in the bottle. I'm just saying let's be very intentional about how we use it to elevate us. And so I gave a talk right at the end of COVID where I asked the audience, it was actually in a planetarium, I asked the audience to close their eyes. And I have a young daughter, and I created a scenario of her a decade in the future, so she would be 12 years old. And I tried to describe what this might look like, where she, you know, steps into a room in the morning after breakfast and enters this virtual world where she has this AI guide. It's a hummingbird called Lily that she interacts with that takes her into this forest where she has these elves that she has played with since she was a little child, and they're constantly pushing her and challenging her and helping her mind expand. And then she leaves, right? She's not there all day. She goes off to school. She plays outside. That was my attempt at not making it dystopian. Still, some audience members still were very disturbed by it. But I think that this is a really exciting future where, you know, look what's happening now with young people in terms of depression, anxiety, suicide around the world going up, up, up. Can we use this technology to pick up the subtle changes in mood and attention and stress that then cascade, sometimes without the parents even knowing? Can our systems pick that up and then just challenge and create environments to help maintain mental health in young people throughout their lives? That was sort of the vision that I was imagining for my daughter.
So to come to the question that, you know, okay. This is like me telling Dan Turner, good you didn't come, then I possibly shouldn't pose the next question. But, you know, listening to you, Adam, is reminding me of what Dan said, that our biological beings and our ancient selves are not being able to keep up with technology. And he was saying we need the enhancements to feel better in the kind of accelerated time. And Yuval Harari actually said this irony as well. He said, you know, everyone thought you're creating technology to give yourself more time. Instead, technology is riding you like a rodeo, you know, and all of us are running faster and faster to keep up with this kind of accelerated time. And so Dan said that, you're saying that we need different ways of feeling equipoise and homeostasis in this faster world. But, you know, Matthew and Pete Nashak would say, use your top-down mind, you know, take control, step back, etc. But my question to you, Adam, when you were describing this to me, was that it really does seem very dystopic. You know, it's very dystopic to be watching yourself with this level of granularity all the time, you know. It's quite opposite to the spiritual impulse, which is to separate yourself, like not have this acute sense of I all the time. Here, people are like mapping themselves minute by minute, second by second. One is that. What is this level of cellular surveillance? Second is that I think it would play to that, you know, the reward loop and lack of resilience, that the moment you're a little in an adverse situation, you go to your AI guide, it calms you, shows you some virtual forest, and then you come out and I don't know how many of you have watched Black Mirror, but there's a Black Mirror episode where a mother attaches a screen to her child's mind or body, and every time the child crosses anything that's unpleasant, the AI immediately turns the screen into this vivid, calming, beautiful world. And when the child discovers that she's been living in a Truman Show of happiness, she takes the screen off and smashes it down on the parent's face, and we don't know how it quite ends. But there is that, Adam, so I'm sure you're aware. How do you navigate this?
Yeah, I think of it the exact opposite way. And I understand, like, as I said, fire burns your house down, cooks your dinner. The fact that the exact opposite way exists is important, and it's responsible for us to recognize that. But my intentions, like if you just even look at the video game that we created for ADHD treatment, as probably everyone here knows, the current treatment is a stimulant, right, for children, which doesn't change their brain in any way. You take it off and you immediately revert. This approach is not to create an escape. That is not my intentions. This approach is to strengthen our brains, to create resilience, so that when you interact in this insanely complex, rapidly changing world, you have a stronger brain to do so. It is not an escape. It is a tool of enhancement, not very different. I actually feel like I lean more on the side of the, toughen the fuck up, work hard. This is work. This is not a free lunch. This is not a magic brain pill. It is the opposite of that. The hardest challenge we face with our video game treatment is that it is hard. And there's a lot of thrown iPads out there from little kids. Like it pushes you. This is training. And so this environment, it's not really like, these are your metrics, what are you gonna do? And it's just, it's invisible to you. You just enter an environment that is adaptive to you, that's pushing and rewarding you, and you're playing in it. So it doesn't feel, to me, that, what do all these metrics mean, and how do I map it, and how do I quantify myself? It's not, that is not the vision I have. The vision is that that's invisible. That's used to create this tool and this world that you can enter that helps your brain become stronger and more resilient, so that you don't need to go back there all the time, so that you can go out and have a better life in the real world. And it should be used in a very time-limited fashion. Like, for example, right now in an ADHD game, one of the biggest side effects that we were concerned about was addiction, because it's fun and it's engaging, and we do that intentionally to create this real sense of immersion. So our medicine can't be overdosed, because we deliver it 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, 1 month, and that's it. That's a dose. And then we adjust and see, maybe you don't need it anymore. So I do not want to create chronic treatments. These should be just using technologies to give our brains a little strength to interact with the world better.
Thank you very much, Adam. It's amazing. Distill all this down. The big message is our brains are plastic. We can take control, seek the remedies that we want, and it's not that it is as it is, and it can change, and that's a very hopeful message, actually.
I think so. The last thing I want to say, I just want to finish with one thing, and it's about this concept of crisis and the world that feels so, I live in the U.S., what's going on in my country right now, and it's distressing. And, we have these big changes like climate change that we just feel incapable of dealing with. Like, we know exactly what's going on. We have technological solutions, yet it seems outside of our grasp. It's not an outside problem. It is a brain problem that we cannot correct climate change. And if we cannot figure out how to sustain our attention and make future-oriented, wise, creative decisions that help other people and not ourselves, we will never manage these complex, time-delayed crises like climate change. So the opportunity we have in front of us is to use technology to elevate ourselves so that we can actually survive in this world, I would say.
Thank you very, very much, Adam. It's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.